For many years now, people have lived and died based on the very complex principle of people dying when they are killed. Some games build their entire identity on this fact, and others have entirely separate game modes dedicated towards people looking to cause physical pain onto themselves. Heck, sometimes the fans themselves will go out of their way to inflict this pain upon themselves willingly, via self-imposed challenge runs. But there is a bit of an issue with permadeath. Specifically permadeath in a little game called Fire Emblem, which I'm somewhat a fan of, unless you haven't realised. You see, a unit dying in Fire Emblem is objectively a detriment to the strength of your army/team. And, I mean, of course it is. That is why you're playing a game with permadeath after all. But then, why exactly do people reset their game and willingly beset themselves with hours of lost progress whenever they lose a unit? Well, initially I just chalked it up to people being wusses, but I'll be honest and say that I too, the self-proclaimed Kaga elitist, also reset whenever I lose one of my favourite units. And I think the reason why people reset is quite obvious. If you lose too many units, then there's a chance that you can get soft-locked out of being the game, especially on higher difficulties. This fear of wasting hours of your life on a game you can't beat just because you decided to be an epic pro gamer who never resets is very reasonable. After all, in any game with an EXP system, every kill you put into a unit is essentially a resource. And in a game like Fire Emblem, which usually has limited amounts of EXP, if you lose too many of your units that you've trained up, there's a non-0% chance that you can't complete the game anymore. Losing immeasurable amounts of resources that you put into a character due to a bad stroke of luck would make anyone reset. After all, why would you keep playing a game that you can't beat? But there are two games in particular that I would like to bring up which work around this issue. The first game is Valkyria Chronicles. This game has a permadeath system where if your units have their HP reach 0, they get built into a state where they're unable to move and must be taken off the map by an allied unit. If an enemy walks over them, or 3 turns pass with no allies coming to their rescue, you'll permanently lose that character forever. So how does this game stop you from just resetting after every death? Well, it's simple. Units don't level up from defeating enemies or taking actions like in Fire Emblem, but rather, they level up as classes rather than individuals. The EXP which you obtain based on the rank you get from finishing the game's missions can get built into a class of units rather than a specific individual, which will boost their HP alongside unlocking new potentials, which are this game's equivalent to skills. The better the rank, the more EXP you get to use on your units. What this means is that you're not just investing in one singular unit, you're investing into several of them. So if one dies, you don't have as big a hole in your army as you would have otherwise, thus reducing the likelihood that you actually need to reset. Each individual character still has their personality and potentials, on top of whatever they get from their class, so they still keep their individuality as characters to a degree. But it's not like you've invested resources into that one guy exclusively. The less you have to lose from a unit dying, the more likely you are to actually let them stay dead. It's a pretty good system which highly complements this game's mechanics and systems, is what I wish I could say. You see, as previously mentioned, units that get downed during a mission can get rescued for further use down the line. However, the issue arises with the fact that, number 1, units having 3 turns of being downed before they permanently die is way too long, especially with how fast some of these maps are. You are almost virtually always capable of saving a downed ally, unless you have the thinking capacity of a literal candlestick. Number 2, units can re-enter the same map that they were mobilized in, regardless of the fact that they were set on fire 30 seconds ago. And lastly, number 3, you can quite literally save after every move you make. And no, I don't mean turn. I mean after every single individual action you take with your units. To summarize why this is a very stupid system, the main, if not only reason why you would ever actually just willingly let one of your units die in a game like Fire Emblem, is that if you were to simply reset the game to before they died, you would lose a ton, and I mean a ton, of progress. Meaning hours of your life would disappear, just like that. But with the fact that you can essentially save after every second of gameplay, means that you're never really at risk of losing any progress. Unless you choose to be. And yeah, you can just play without save scumming. But just like the Tower of Volney and Sacred Stones, the fact that this is an option is just downright tragic for the game's difficulty. Don't get me wrong, the game is still fun, and is still most definitely one of my favourite strategy RPGs, but sadly, its permadeath isn't its strong suit. But that aside, there is another game I need to talk about, and that game is Berwick Saga. Berwick Saga is what I would describe as the natural evolution to Fire Emblem. It has hexagons instead of squares, it has a turn order that's more dynamic than when you get in Fire Emblem, and overall, its entire premise was improving upon the heavily unbalanced tiering saga. A game which was so much like Fire Emblem that it literally got sued. Berwick Saga has the traditional permadeath which is seen in Fire Emblem. A non-major unit dies, they don't come back. The main lord dies, you see you in the game over screen. Theoretically, it should have the same issue with Fire Emblem's permadeath, where you're too scared to leave units dead, in case you don't have enough for endgame. And yeah, the game does have this issue. In fact, in this game, it's arguably even worse than in Fire Emblem, since every character has their own side story, some of which include maps which can only be unlocked with said units being alive. So how does Kaga, the father of Fire Emblem, combat this issue? Well, it's simple. The game compensates you for your unit deaths. Just as an example, if you happen to lose 4 of your units, you'll gain an item called the Dusk Charm, which is an accessory which gives you a plus 17 to avoid when equipped. Sounds like a pretty crap form of compensation, right? And yeah, I'd be tempted to agree with you. If we were talking about any other game, that is. Berwick Saga is a game with hit rates that are so incredibly shaky that it makes Binding Blade look reliable. And so a boost as tiny as this actually does wonders for gameplay. And besides, the game shouldn't reward you for losing units, but rather, it should stop itself from feeling unwinnable. And the mere fact that you actually get anything for losing units in this game is very much appreciated. The game builds itself around permadeath more so than any other Fire Emblem or JRPG I've ever played. Items that your dead units were carrying get sent to you posthumously, and you can get more goodies than just the Dusk Charm. But I'd rather not spoil things here, and tell you to actually find out yourself by playing this highly under-talked about game. It's worth knowing that in a fashion similar to Valkyria Chronicles, mid-chapter saves do exist in Berwick Saga, but this isn't really game-breaking in my opinion for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, you can only save once every 5 turns, so the game is actually telling you when you can or can't save scum, and not the other way around. And it's something that maps actually build themselves around using enemy reinforcements, and other events that trigger shortly after these save points. And reason number 2, the growths in Berwick Saga are extremely low, and so in the off chance that you actually manage to level up a stat, you'll do everything you can to not reset. This applies to other RNG related mechanics as well, such as cripples and theft. This does lead to the downside of allowing level rigging to be easier, but minus a few instances, I would say that the challenges of Berwick Saga come from the map and enemy design itself, rather than the simple inflation of enemy stats. Therefore, you have a much lower incentive to grind for levels when compared to the average Fire Emblem game. Just to further my daily Kaga glaze just a tiny bit further, I should also bring up the fact that Berwick Saga has its own cemetery, which is where you can pay respects to all the casualties of your stupidity. Every tombstone has a unique message written on it, which is just a nice touch and small gesture that modern Fire Emblem just doesn't do, despite having like 174 times the budget of this game. Kaga's vision was always about players experiencing their own unique story, and not getting caught up in making a perfect ending. That's why his games feel so much more centralized over the idea of your units dying than modern Fire Emblem. That's why characters in Berwick Saga have spoilers built right into their death quotes for absolutely no reason. And most importantly, That's why he's the GOAT when it comes to making simulation RPG games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.